Marc Lepine. Not all men are like that.
Men are good. Yes, they are. Let's take the phrase Marc Lepine. Not all men are like that. Why doesn't that stick? It doesn't stick. You know, the feminists have been using this Montreal massacre for 30 years now. This is number 30. And they use it to try and say that it's all about how men are violent against women, and men are this, and men are that. And it sticks. It's like people go, yeah, violence is masculine. You know, these toxic masculinity things, blah, 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 right? Crazy. How does it stick? Not all men are like that. For crying out loud, I mean, Lepine really was a sad guy. I mean, he was abused as a child. His father abused his mother, and he watched that, and mental illness in the family, and it was just on. The kid was really troubled. So not all men are like that. I mean, he applied to the army, and they wouldn't take him because of antisocial stuff. I mean, it's like, he's not a representative of men, and yet they've been for years using that as proof that men are violent. And there's this whole thing about it, you know, this idea that there's violence against women, and it's men who are the problem, right? Oh boy. But take, on the other hand, you know, women who are a problem. Think about, what was her name, Eileen Wuornos, or Mary Winkler, or Lorena Bobbitt, or someone like that. The first thing you hear is, not all women are like that. And everyone, right, that's right, not all women are like that. So what the hell's going on here? I mean, on one sex, it's like everyone nods and says, it's not like that. And the other sex, it's like everyone nods and says, yeah, see, men are violent. It's like, okay, how does this double standard hold up? What's fueling this double standard? And I think there's a lot of things, but let's talk about one. And one thing that's fueling it, I think, is our culture's basic lack of compassion for men and boys. A basic lack of compassion. And it has been like this for a long time. This is not something new. You know, even in the 1950s, there was a basic lack of compassion for the emotional pain of boys and men. But at the same time, boys and men were respected. Gosh, I can remember when I was a little guy, you know, men were respected for being stoic. For being stoic. You know what? Why? Why were they respected for being stoic? And this took some of the sting out of not having any compassion for your emotional pain, right? At least you were looked up to and thought of as being something worthwhile because you were stoic. What is it about stoic? This really confused me for a long time until I started working with people who were dying and grieving, and I worked with families who had the terrible experience of having one of their children die. And so, like a moron, you know, I'd meet with these families together, and I'd say, everyone needs to have a chance to emote, you know. This is a very difficult thing, the whole family. Because I was thinking, you know, we're all equal, right? Oh, God. Dumb. Early rookie therapist. So I'd do that, and guess what would happen? You know, that we'd get to the father, everybody else would emote and blah, blah, blah. We'd get to the father, and he'd say, oh, no, it's okay. I'm fine. And so I'd encourage him, no, Dad, you know, it's only fair that you also get to be a part of this. And finally, he'd start crying, right? What would happen? As soon as he started crying, the kids would get fidgety. They'd get worried. And the mother would get worried too. But the kids then, after a while, when he keeps crying, it's like everything starts to fall apart. And it took me a while to figure that out. But once I saw it, I realized, holy crap, what's going on is the father's stoic nature, his capacity to hold his own emotional being, stewarded things for everyone else. His strength in not emoting was something that made a safe space, to use a bad term. It was made the whole family feel safe and contained. It was like a contained space, right? And as soon as he seemed like he was in trouble, everyone else started to worry because they're so used to his being, strong and not emoting. I mean, think about it. A cop comes up to an accident. What happens? He starts crying. No, he doesn't start crying. But imagine that he did. I mean, that is exactly what we're talking about. He needs to contain the space. He needs to get the job done. He needs to go in there and take care of the accident, then emote later. The same thing is true for men. Now, this whole stoic attitude was respected. Our culture respected. I remember, man, back in the 1950s, men were admired for that. But then along came good old feminism. And what did they do? They put a hole in that respect. There's no way they're going to respect men. In fact, there's no way they're going to show any compassion for men. And I learned about this from the early times I guess it was the early 90s, maybe even the late 80s. I started doing workshops about men and emotions. And usually I was doing a lot of them on university campuses, and there was usually 1, 2, or 3% of the group that would have a hard time with this. And they'd say, no, you can't. That's not right about men. We blah, blah. And what they were saying was basically, we can't treat men in a special way for their emotions. Because I was basically saying, look, men do these things differently, so we need to allow that. We need to have compassion for the way that they do things. And these people, no. They didn't really have any way to explain why they were upset, but they were upset. So usually I say, oh, yeah, let's talk after the conference is over. You and I can talk about blah, blah, blah. And sometimes they'd come around and sometimes they wouldn't. But what was going on was this. I realized, it took me a while, but they were seeing that I was saying that we needed to treat men with compassion for their difference, for the way they were different. They could not tolerate that idea. They couldn't tolerate it. Why not? Because their view was so narrow that they saw men as this patriarchy. And you cannot allow that which you have ascribed as being evil any kind of compassion. So that's what was going on, I think. Was that they were unable really to have compassion in their hearts for men and boys, even though they knew from what we had talked about that men and boys were different in the way they did things. But this got them very upset because they couldn't tolerate having compassion. So now men not only are not admired for their stoicism, but they're shamed for not emoting like women. They're shamed for the way they do things. And I think that plays into a part of why this whole default of women, not all women are like that, holds up, but not all men are like that does not. Because feminists have taught our culture, don't have compassion for men and boys. It's absolutely insane. And we need to start speaking up. When you find that someone talks about men are violent, the whole 30th anniversary thing, you need to say clearly, not all men are like that. Not all men are like that. He was a very unusual man. He had a lot of difficulties. And if you listen to the last regarding men, we talked about all the ways this young man was different and had hardships. I mean, he was mentally ill. And we need to have compassion for that, not tolerance for his violence, but we need to have compassion for what was going on with him and understand that he was a unique individual. He does not represent all men. Not all men are like that. Yeah, so that's enough for now. Men are good, so are you. We'll see you.